In the depths of West African history, a figure stands as a symbol of courage, leadership, and sacrifice: Queen Pokou. This powerful woman is at the origin of the foundation of the Baoulé people, one of the most influential communities in Côte d'Ivoire. But what do we really know about Queen Pokou? And why does her story still resonate today, through generations, as ruler of the Ashanti Kingdom in the 18th century? Queen Pokou is distinguished by her wisdom and ability to lead in times of crisis. Faced with an impending war that threatened to decimate her people, she made a bold decision. Instead of fighting, he chose exile. But it wasn't just an escape. It was an act of love to protect his people. Its importance for the Baolets, and for all Fries, is immense. Representative of a female royalty, Y also embodies the emancipation of African women, at a time when female leadership was rare. His determination to lead his people to a new land away from violence shows an inner strength and vision for the future that he may possess. But what makes the story of hate for Pokou so poignant is the ultimate sacrifice she made to save her people, according to legend, to cross the Comoé River and escape enemy forces. Many had to offer what she had most precious, her own son. This tragic gesture forever marked the memory of his people, who later adopted the name Paulet in memory of this lost child. Learning this story, one can't help but wonder, what makes a queen sacrifice her own child to save her people? Was this an act of desperation or genuine love for his people? What is the queen's legacy? Does it leave much to African women today? In this fascinating story, we discover how the queen's sacrifice greatly changed the course of history and continues to influence the identity and culture of the Baol people. We see how this story still resonates with our contemporary struggles. The sun declined, a climatic envelope of golden light, illuminating the capital of the Ashanti Kingdom in peaceful beauty. From her balcony, Queen Pokou, an imposing and majestic figure, silently observes her people. The familiar sounds of everyday life echo in the air, but a shadow hangs over his thoughts. His large eyes, arms usually filled with wisdom and benevolence, now betray deep concern. Bad news was brought to him by his advisors. Tensions with neighboring kingdoms reach a breaking point every day. The noose tightens a little more, the wind blows gently, lifting its heavy, highly decorated golden beads, but nothing seems to soothe his spirit. War is imminent. Suddenly, the fragile calm of the evening is shattered by hurried footsteps. A panting messenger will enter everything into the great hall. Breathless, he kneels before hatred, Pokou, his dusty clothes testifying to the speed at which he traveled the roads. "My queen," begins, her voice trembling with anguish. "Enemy forces are at our borders." Pokou, staring at the glowing horizon, breathes deeply. She closes her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of every life under her responsibility. The sound of war preparations echoes in the corridors, but within her, another voice emerges. She turns slowly to her advisors, her eyes bright. With a new determination, she will not lead her people to war. There is too much to lose, too much life to sacrifice. In a low but firm voice she whispers, "It's time to go." These simple but meaningful words resonate in the saddle like an echo of fate. Her advisors stare at her in disbelief, but no one dares to contradict her. The dark look, the queen, is that she has just made the most difficult decision of her life: flee to survive. Beside the bed, the queen, Many stands in silence, her eyes fixed on her son. Her gaze is filled with tenderness, infinite love, but also with undeniable pride. Her clothes beautifully decorated with complex royal motifs. falls elegantly around it, adding to its natural presence. The golden beads that decorate her hair glow faintly in the dim light, but nothing equals the brilliance of her gaze. She contemplates this little being, with whom she shares a deep, indestructible bond in her heart. She carries the hope that he will grow up in a world of peace, far from the torments that agitate his mind. Every breath of her son is a reminder of everything she must protect, everything she is willing to sacrifice. At dawn, as the first glimmers of dawn paint the sky pink and gold, the people began their exile. The capital of the Maize, cradle of their history, is slowly fading away. Behind them, a long column stretches for miles, composed of family, met what they could save, of silent merchant warriors and beasts of burden, carrying their meager possession. The heaviness of this departure weighs on every soul. At the head of this silent procession, Queen Much walks with relentless determination. It's not her name, but resolute, her gaze fixed straight ahead of her towards an uncertain future. She does not utter a word, but her mere presence is enough to encourage those who follow her. Her traditional cloth dress went gently floating in the morning breeze, a silent symbol of royalty and the responsibility she carries on her shoulders. A few days after the beginning of their exodus, the convoy of the singing people enters an oppressive danced forest. The massive trees, their trunks twisted by time, rise into the sky, forming a natural vault that plunges the forest into a disturbing gloom. Each step echoes in a heavy silence, interrupted only by the cracking of branches and the distant sounds of wild animals. Indistinct roars echo in the air, sending shivers through the younger ones. The shadows of the beasts, though hidden, are felt all around. The queen, many marches in the lead, her eyes alert despite the growing darkness. She feels the tension growing among her people, each murmuring silent prayers for them to escape this hostile forest. But it's not just nature that threatens them. As they advance cautiously, a scout suddenly appears between the wounded and panting trees. They move towards hatred. After days of walking, the singing people finally reach the mountains that stand before them. Imposing and intimidating, the steep slopes shoot towards the sky, and the air becomes fresher and thinner with each step. The path, once relatively flat, now turns into a curdled and steep one, making progress difficult for all. Tired feet struggle against the rocks, and exhausted bodies struggle to move forward. Fatigue begins to eat away at even the strongest, while whispers of doubt spread through the ranks. "We must continue," she cries loudly, breaking the silence of the mountains. These words resonate in the cold, dry air, infusing new energy into those around him. Her arms outstretched, she encourages the warriors to support the weakest, to carry children. When they can no longer walk, they urge everyone to persevere. For she knows that the top of her mountains is only the beginning of their salvation. But despite her comforting words, she feels the weight of doubt on her own shoulders. She too is tired, not only physically, but also mentally. Every stone under his feet reminds him of the heavy burden of his people, of his decision, of this journey. But she continues, because quitting is not an option. Night fell, enveloping the encampment of the people sang in almost total darkness. Around the flickering campfires, tired figures rest, trying to find a little respite after the long and exhausting climb up the mountains. But tonight, the silence of the mountain is broken by distant cries. Eerie echoes echo through the valley, smoothing in the cool air like sinister whispers. The scouts who were patrolling around the camp return hurriedly. Their faces are tense, marked by fear and urgency. They are heading toward hatred, many, breathless, bearing news that all feared. "My queen, they are near." One of them, the voice trembling, continues, "The enemies are not far away, they are hunting us, and there are many of them." The flames of the torches cast perimeter shadows on the surrounding rocks, and these shadows seem to mingle with those of hidden enemies, threatening to descend on them at any moment. But as long as the queen is there, at the center of the line of defense, these warriors know they are not alone. The cries of the enemies no longer intimidate them, for they are ready to defend their people to the end. After days of exhaustion, the Ashanti convoy finally arrives across the Comoé River. But what should have been relief quickly turns into despair. Before them, it was an impassable obstacle, a broad, petulant river with swirling and menacing streams. The current is so strong that it is impossible to imagine a crossing on foot. The wagons lie projecting splinters of cold water on the bank, as if to mark their hostility to this liquid wall. Panic begins to spread among the people. Families, already exhausted by the long journey, look at each other with wide eyes, desperately seeking a solution. Children cry, mothers hug them, and the oldest whispers of prayers to spirits. How to overcome this titanic obstacle? When time is running out and enemy forces rapidly converge around hatred, a lot. The whispers turn into screams of despair. "We're trapped," a man cries, his eyes filled with terror. Others shake their heads, dejected, unable to find a solution. Fear spreads quickly and with it uncertainty. The Comoé River seems indomitable, an obstacle far too great for an exhausted people, pursued by implacable enemies. Why the Queen remains calm, though her mind is bubbling with thought. She observes the river with narrowed eyes, as if searching for an answer in the tumultuous current. She knows that time is running out, that the enemies are closing in, and that her people no longer have the strength to resist another fight. She looks at the frightened faces around her. Feeling the weight of their hope resting on his shoulders, the choice is cruel and the urgency palpable. Every second that passes brings the enemies closer, and the angry river seems to want to swallow them up before they even find a solution. Why grits her mind tormented by the need for an imminent decision? She knows they can neither flee nor fight. The Comoé River with its swirling waters becomes their last obstacle, but also their last hope. In the distance, sounds of war getting closer and closer mingle with the crash of the waters. The enemies are there, at hand, and the people have singing their presence, growing like a sinister shadow that envelops them. The scouts report that the opposing forces are now visible on the horizon, and there is not much time left. The songs of the priests fade, their voices break under the weight of the silence of the spirits. One of them turns to hate, his eyes filled with dismay. "The spirits do not answer us," he murmurs, very desperate, his face ravaged by worry. He looks at the river, looking for a sign, a solution. But nothing happens. The river remains unleashed, and the threat of the enemies becomes more and more pressing. Time seems to escape, and with it, the people's last chances of survival sang. As the prayers fade and despair slowly seizes the people, an elder slowly advances toward hatred. His step is hesitant, the weight of age and grief weighing down his steps. His face, bridled by time, is marked by deep sadness. And yet a fierce resolution shines in his eyes. When he reached Pokou, he bowed slightly, then looked up at her, his lips trembling. The river demands a blood tribute. He thanks him in a broken voice. These words, though soft, resound like a thunderclap in the heavy air. The silence is overwhelming and everything seems to stop. The Queen stares at the elder. Unable to immediately understand the meaning of his words, Pokou takes a step back. Horrified, his mind immediately rejects the idea. A wave of disgust and revolt running through his entire being. How could she contemplate such a sacrifice? How could she, having done everything to protect her people, offer an innocent life in exchange for their salvation? "No, it's impossible," she says in a muffled voice, shaking her head, refusing to believe that the spirits could demand such a price. But the elder does not back down. His gaze is heavy with wisdom, and his voice, though trembling, remains firm. "It's the only way, my Queen. The spirits of the river will only calm down if we give them what they ask for. A sacrifice." The words seem to hang in the air, heavy with meaning, heavy with despair. Why? Without her heart clenching in her chest, she glances around her, watching her people, the exhausted faces of mothers, children, old people, all turn to her, waiting for her to make a decision. The weight of this responsibility is immense, almost unbearable. She turns again to the river, whose swirling waters continue to defy their passage. Time is running out, and the enemies are almost there. If she does not act, all will be lost. The queen closes her eyes for a moment, searching for another solution, another way to spare her people without giving in to this unthinkable demand. But nothing comes to him. The spirits are silent, the waters remain unleashed, and danger draws inexorably closer. Finally, Poker opens his eyes, an unspeakable pain. Looking through her eyes, she understands that this is the only way out. The river is only resting at the price of a sacrifice, a cruel, heartbreaking but necessary choice. For her people to survive, she must make a decision that no mother should ever have to consider. She straightens, her face marked by anguish, but his eyes are determined. She knows what to do, even if her heart is about to break. The moment of truth has arrived. While the whispers of the elder still resonate in her mind, the queen, Many freezes, overwhelmed by the understanding of what she must do. Her eyes instinctively turn to her son, the child she loves more than anything in the world. His heart breaks. But it remained deep inside her that there was no other choice. Tears welled up in his eyes, blurring his vision. Every fiber of his being rejects this unthinkable sacrifice, but the survival of his people depends on it. His face ravaged by pain, many approach his son who rests innocently, ignoring the gravity of this moment. She takes him gently in her arms, her hands trembling, tenderly caressing his cheeks. His lips whispered words of love, words that only a mother could say in such a situation. "My child, my treasure." She speaks to him softly, in a broken voice but filled with tenderness, hoping that he will feel the full force of her love. The child, trusting a calm, tightens his little arms around his mother without understanding what is being played. At this moment, Many look at him for a long time, her face distorted by the silent pain she tries to hide. Every step towards the river tears away a piece of his soul. Every second that passes plunges her into a whirlwind of grief and resignation. She is moving slowly towards the banks of the Conway. It is not heavy and uncertain, but its duty is unshakable. Around her, the people watch, horrified, in silence. No one dares to speak. All understand the weight of the gesture that is about to be accomplished, but no ego could express the magnitude of the sacrifice. Arriving at the edge of the river so that the feet stop in the icy water, the roar of the rolling round seems to be silent, as if nature itself was waiting, suspended, to see what the queen will decide. She serves her son against her one last time, his heart about to break permanently. "Forgive me," she whispers, tears now streaming freely down her cheeks with a final prayer to the spirits of the river. A final plea for mercy. She gently drops her child into the troubled waters. Time seems to stand still, the waves carry it away, and the faces of many, distorted by pain, do not leave the point where they disappeared under the waves. An overwhelming silence invades the place. Every member of the people holds their breath, their eyes fixed on the queen whose sacrifice has marked a point of no return. The river now bears witness to an immeasurable loss, and the queen's pain, though silent, resonates like an echo in the hearts of all who witness this tragic scene. The moment the child touches the troubled waters, an almost supernatural silence descends on the river. The once unleashed waves freeze, and in an instant, the furious current turns into a smooth and peaceful surface. The roar of the waves disappears, replaced by a deep calm that invades the entire valley. The spirits of the river accepted the sacrifice under the incredulous eyes of the people. A voice emerges, clear and steady, in the middle of the river, where there were only tumultuous waters. Moments earlier, a miraculous path opens, offering an escape for this hunted and exhausted people. It's a miracle, but no words are spoken. Everyone remains frozen, stunned, unable to believe what he sees, at the moment when the child touches the tormented waters in silence. Almost overmature envelopes the valley. The once raging waves calm down, and the river becomes a peaceful surface. But instead of a clear voice of water, Massive silhouettes slowly emerge from the depths. Under the astonished gazes of the people, a dozen imposing hippos appear. Forming a living path through the waters, their broad, stable, and powerful backs create a natural bridge on which people could walk safely. The river spirits responded to the sacrifice by sending these majestic creatures to guide the Ashantis to the other side. Stunned by this miracle, the Ashantis slowly move forward with a mixture of awe and respect. Warriors, mothers, and children all walk silently on the backs of hippos. As if he wanted a sacred land, the creatures remain motionless, bearing the weight of this hunted and exhausted people. The shock of the child sacrifice is felt in every step as the people advance, realizing that this miraculous path was granted to them at the price of the life of their queen's son. The river, witness to this sacrifice, becomes both the place of their deliverance and their mourning. The Ashanti people, stunned, begin to move slowly. The first to put a foot in the water, the bottom, with a hesitation mixed with fear and respect. The warriors, the mothers, the children, all advance in silence, as if they were crossing sacred ground. The shock of sacrifice is still in the air. Each of them knows that this path is paved with the sacrifice of their hatred that was granted to them at the cost of the life of an innocent person. Tears flow discreetly down the cheeks of some, while others move forward with their heads bowed, their hearts heavy. Every step is gravitating. They cross the river in procession, walking to the other side, but their minds remain fixed on what they have just lost behind them. The river almost seems to guide them, protecting their passage, as if the spirits themselves accompanied them in this crossing. But the pain of loss is palpable, and although their bodies pass through that miraculous voice, their souls remain chained to the moment of sacrifice. Always on the shore. Watch his people cross. His empty eyes stare at the horizon. Her heart is broken, but she knows her duty is done. The river, now calm and silent, welcomes the Ashanti people who advance slowly, in a procession marked by gravity. The silence is total. No less is pronounced, but the atmosphere is heavy, laden with a sadness that envelops every walker. Everyone knows that this miraculous voice that offers them freedom was opened at the price of the greatest of sacrifices. With heavy hearts, they move forward, their gaze lowered, crushed by the weight of this act that haunts them. The children, usually curious and noisy, hold firmly in the hands of their parents, silent and confused, feeling the gravity of this moment without understanding its depth. Mothers, red-eyed, walk with their heads down, praying that this sacrifice will not be in vain. The warriors, once so valiant, take their steps exhausted not only by the journey, but also by the emotional weight of what they have just experienced. The once impassable river has softened, but the hearts of those who cross it are weighed down by sorrow. At the head of the convoy, Queen Pokou, always upright, but her face marked by an indelible pain, says of her people, "It is not her wine." Every step she takes on this path is marked by the memory of her son swept away by the waves in exchange for the freedom of her people. Her gaze is fixed, lost in the void, but she knows her duty is accomplished. The sacrifice was necessary, even if it broke his sea heart. The years passed, and the Baoulé people, under the guidance of Queen Pokou, prospered in this new land. The songs are green, the villages grow, and life resumes. But the memory of the sacrifice of the queen and her son, the child who allowed the survival of their people, remains engraved in the collective memory of the Baoulets. To honor this heroic act, a grand ceremony is held on that day. The Baoul people gather en masse, dressed in their finest traditional clothes, faces grave but respectful, the elders, the burros. Mothers and children are all present to commemorate the sacrifice that has marked their history and continues to guide their identity as a people. At the center of this ceremony, an imposing statue is unveiled. A statue of Queen Pokou, carved in the noblest stone, stands majestically. She is depicted standing, staring into the distance, carrying a child in her arms, the expression on her face both marked by sadness and strength. The symbol is clear. She is the mother who gave what she had most precious to ensure the survival of her people. The imposing statue seems to dominate the square, an eternal reminder of the love and duty she showed. As traditional songs echo in the air, the Baulets gather in silence, reminding each of them of the depth of the sacrifice of their hatred. He turns to the statue with respect, the younger ones listening with fascination to the story of this legendary woman, who gave everything so that he could live free. Every word of the elders tells how their freedom and prosperity were forged in grief, but also in resilience. The queen, many though physically absent and present in every heart, her name is enumerated with veneration and her act of sacrifice, immortalized by this statue, will continue to inspire future generations. The Baulets will never forget their past, for it is the very foundation of their identity. At the end of the ceremony, as the sun begins to descend on the horizon, a solitary figure slowly advances towards the statue. It is Queen Pokou, aging, her body weakened by time, but her spirit as strong as ever. She stops in front of the representation of her son, and whispers almost inaudibly, "I hope you forgive me." The wind blows gently, making the dresses of the participants ripple, and in this breath, it seems that nature itself offers a silent answer. The memory of many. The queen who sacrificed her child for her people will live forever in history and the heart of what she did.